And welcome back to Creative Thinkers. My name is Miguel Valenzuela, and as always, we bring you somebody special, but I feel like I've known this individual for a very, very long time, and we're talking almost 20 years here. So let me introduce her. Her name is Kelley Donahue-Wallace. She is a professor at University of North Texas, and she is the co-author of the book that we will be using here in the future at El Paso Community College, and the book is called Living with Art. Welcome, Kelley.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here, Miguel.
So I'm super excited because in reality, I feel like I met you many, many decades ago. But what you do is you actually co-authored a book that we have used here at the El Paso Community College in the past. And that book is the book that we use for the art appreciation core classes, which is exciting to me because I'm an artist, right? So I always try to start off the interview by getting to know the person a little bit better. So you're not from El Paso, you are from Dallas, I assume?
I live in Denton.
Okay.
So just north of Dallas.
Okay. Are you from there, though?
No. Originally, I lived in upstate New York. And my parents were school teachers at a boarding school in upstate New York in the 70s. And they realized they could be school teachers elsewhere.
Right.
And so they picked up stakes and moved us to Europe. So we lived in Holland for a year, and then we moved to Spain for 3 years, and then we settled in California. So I consider myself a Californian after all those moves.
I consider myself a Californian as well. Born there, raised for about 10, 15 years, and then moved over here to El Paso, Texas. So we're in El Paso, you're in North Texas. Being from Texas, one of the, I think, important ideas or concepts that we can talk about is creativity, because I feel like sometimes Texas is not seen as the most forward-thinking state. But here we're talking about this kind of forward, outside-the-box thinking. How do you think that your upbringing influenced what you do today? Not just being a professor, but also being a writer.
Well, my parents, part of what they did was, they found a solution where they could do what they wanted to do and have some freedom. And so they set aside what they were supposed to do, and they thought about what was possible. And to me, that is kind of the core of creativity, is seeing a situation and not just following what you know, but looking at it for what's possible with it. What are the possibilities? And so that, being raised that way, where my parents were always looking for something else, something that isn't, the expected path for a school teacher in their case, it really ingrained in me this interest in solving problems creatively, because after all, that's sort of the root of creativity is facing a problem, facing a challenge, and thinking about ways to solve it that isn't just rote memorization or what everybody else does, but instead approaching it in a different way, seeing those raw materials and thinking about what else you could do with them.
And I think it's beautiful that you were able to take something that you learned from your parents and kind of move forward with it. How did that allow you to get into art history? Because art history is kind of the basis of what you've studied and how you got into actually writing.
Yeah, no, they took us, I have a sister, and while we were abroad, they took us to every museum, and I was kind of the typical little kid, a bit bored, and so my sister and I would race ahead 3 rooms in the museum and sit there on the bench and wait until my parents caught up. But they were constantly exposing us to historical works of art in their context, going into the Gothic cathedrals in France and into the museums to see the objects. And I just loved it. I loved once I gave it a chance, when I started to actually look, I loved looking at the art, and talking to my parents about the object, especially my dad, really liked to focus in on the history of it, what it meant, what was happening at the time that would make someone create and respond this way. And so that made me interested in it. And in high school, my sister and I, back in California, both went to a humanities magnet school. So we had art history in high school, and that was awesome. And so by the time I finished with that, I really knew what I wanted to do. Although I took a slight detour
What was
into the
that?
world of marine biology. And then I discovered that I get a little seasick. And so I came back to art history.
That's
But yeah,
hilarious.
and just loved it as a college student at the University of California at Santa Cruz. And
That's
then I
right by
went
the
to,
water.
yeah, it is. Yeah, I know. That's why I went there. Then I went to graduate school at the University of New Mexico. And while I was there, just started to work in their rare book room and studied
Oh,
prints.
okay.
And so woodcuts and engravings, and would sit up in the stacks during when I was supposed to be working, looking at the prints that were illustrating the books. And that's what really got me interested in that as a research topic, Latin American prints, particularly of the 18th century.
Do you think that if you went to another school, let's say New York or some other place where they had a different type of book or information or collection, you would be into something different?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Would I have been drawn to something
Yeah,
else?
yeah.
I think that UNM really shaped my interest. My first semester I got there, we had to come up with an original research project. And I, of
Okay.
course, was new and didn't know what I'd do.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my professors suggested these wonderful paintings that are done on elk hide that were done at the mission churches in the 17th and 18th centuries. And
Mm-hmm.
so studying those, I tried to figure out where the inspiration for those images came from. And that's how I first was brought to prints, engravings from Europe. And then so if I hadn't started with that project, I might not have ended up with prints. But fortunately, I did. Who knows? It might have been something else if I'd gone elsewhere.
Yeah, which is really beautiful. Going back
Yeah.
to your parents, I'm intrigued by the fact that they had the open-mindedness to allow you to make these changes with your life in reference to we want to kind of uproot our children and take them somewhere because we believe that it is valuable or of value for them in their future. What was their background? Because what did they teach exactly?
Spanish.
No way. Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, cool.
they met when they were in college on a school year abroad, a junior year abroad in Guatemala. They were both
Wow.
Spanish majors and met there. My dad's family had a long history of travel and moving around. My mom's family was from Massachusetts and didn't travel internationally much, but she's a brave woman and went off to Guatemala on her own in the early 60s. And so that they already had the travel bug. And then they went to, after they graduated, they moved to Colombia in South America,
wow.
and where my
Yeah.
sister was born, and then New Orleans, then New York, where I came along.
That's really interesting. And I think that that's one of the most powerful things, to have that ability to do things, which when in return will allow your children, friends, whoever is associated to your group to then grow in many ways. So having that ability to grow, how has that helped you in what you're currently doing? Because you're actually teaching right now.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I've taught at UNT this is coming up on my 25th year there.
Wow,
So I've been there a
congratulations.
while. Thank you. I think that the experience that my parents instilled in us is resilience, the willingness to try things. I still remember the first time I tried squid in a paella in Holland, and my parents didn't tell us what it was. They're like, just try it.
Right.
And my sister and I, they'd given us such a sense of adventure and that we were safe to try things. We just dove right in, and so that sort of it's a symbol of how, their braveness, and they're willing to fail, to try things and fail and have things not work out as planned, really gave us that same willingness to try things out. And again, that's, if we're thinking about creativity, that ability to try things, and then maybe it didn't work out, I'll try it a different way. I'll try something new. I'll try to find a different solution. That definitely affects my work even today. When I'm doing my research or teaching my classes, to present materials to students and then gauge their response. And then if that doesn't work, try something else and keep changing in order to get to the point where I'm being the most effective I can be in helping students learn.
Yeah, and in helping them learn, you allow them to grow, which is very important. But going back to getting the idea of kind of allowing yourself to be evolved, there is a saying there's nothing to fear but fear itself. And it feels like, based on what we've spoken about before in prior conversations and what we're talking about right now, how important do you think it is, and how does that correlate to this whole creative aspect? Because a lot of times people literally are afraid of understanding or doing creative things because they feel that they're not following the status quo, and maybe that is a fear within the fear of not understanding. So how do you feel that that's important, or how does it correlate to the importance of art or creativity?
Yeah, and I think the fear of not doing it right or doing it well, I don't want to try something because I'm not good at it. That, as you're trying to, as an instructor, I'm trying to help students learn creativity, learn critical thinking and problem solving. That fear of it is something you have to try to move them past. And so having the opportunity of a safe space where you can try things without judgment, without high stakes testing and those kinds of things, gives you the freedom to be willing to put yourself out there and to be willing to go out on a limb to try something new. And so that's something that in the educational process, I think all of us are responsible for cultivating, for helping students to be willing to try something, to talk, to raise the hand in class, or if that's not comfortable, try it in the small group, and then transition to being willing to do it in class. That's our responsibility as instructors. Students all start with this sort of boldness of children, and then it kind of goes away after a while as they learn that there are specializations and that some kids may know more than they do about a topic. And our job is to get them back in the ring, right? To get them back into the conversation and to try.
So this is like a very broad question, but one of the studies that has been done, and I believe it was done by Harvard, was trying to better understand the level of creativity within individuals at certain grade levels or ages. And it is stated within that particular study that children under, I believe, 6 or 7 are at their most creative. And as you age, you lose this kind of ability to be creative. How do you think that comes together or is connected to our education, whether it be homeschooled or an educational system or whatever it is, or maybe the school of hard knocks? How do you think it's connected?
I think 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds are in classes where they're doing everything in a very integrated way. Later on in middle school and high school, we have 50 minutes for math, and then we have 50 minutes for social studies and 50 minutes for art. And so we start to pull life apart into these discrete areas of learning. Whereas in the K, especially kindergarten through 3rd grade, 4th grade, things are much more integrated in the way students are getting to know a topic. And so they're learning about the texts that they're reading, and they're learning how to read with illustrated books, and they're doing math with blocks. So to them, the creative side of things is very much just part of the learning process, and then we separate it out. And some kids are really good at the way that art is being taught, and some don't have that gift, and so don't feel that they're good at it, and so they begin to be self-conscious, and that just gets more and more exaggerated over the years as they get older and older, to the point where by the time they get to college, the thought of taking a drawing class and not being an art major, I think is absolutely terrifying for some students, even though it teaches so many valuable skills that are applicable to any field of study, not just to art. I'm always a huge advocate of looking, the close looking, spending time to look. And I think what people who haven't taken a lot of art classes may not know is that when you take an art class, you don't just sit down right away and start sketching.
Right.
You spend a lot of time looking and seeing what it is in front of you, rather than just sort of rushing by the images and things around you. And so taking that time to look applies as much to art as it does to business, as it does to medicine, as it does to politics or history. All that slow observation and taking it in and really considering what's being communicated through that, we can call it data, through what's coming in through your eyes. And that's a skill, a visual literacy skill that's applicable in any field and just in our everyday life, because all these things are all around us. We're constantly surrounded by murals and Instagram photos and all of that. And so learning to really see what's there by giving it the time to look at it slowly is a valuable skill.
And I agree with you, because one of the things that I talk about, whether it be in an actual studio class like a drawing class, or whether it be in art appreciation, where I really take the time to help the students understand the importance of what this thing called art is in association with what creativity is for them to be able to see. And one of the exercises that I give them is to actually make a drawing in art appreciation class. One of the questions that I ask them is, what does it take to be a good drawer, a good artist? And a lot of them are all patience, a lot of them are like practice, this, that, and the other, but none of them ever say, and it's very rare that somebody says, it's observation. So you make a very, very good point that it is this opening of the eyes and in turn opening of the mind that really helps anybody in any thing that they want to do, whether you want to be a surgeon or you want to be an artist per se, because all these things are learned skills, and it is through this opening of the mind that helps the individual attain these things. Like, I want to get a degree in science, but in order for you to be a good scientist, you have to be an excellent observer, right? Or else you're not going to be able to see the things that are there. I mean, before we knew atoms existed, we had to find them, right? And somebody had to have the open-mindedness to say, I believe that this thing exists, and this is just a theory that I've come up with, a concept that I've come up with, but it is that had instilled in us the ability to go out and search for these things. And I always tell my students, there is a thing called experiencing things, and without that experience, then you're never going to get to the place where you need to be. So if you ever have a chance to get out and even go to the corner, because you never know what you're going to find at the corner. I gave them that example today, as a matter of fact. I said, what could you find at the corner? And somebody raised up their hand. Oh, well, I could find a little drawing that somebody made at the corner. That's right. What else can you find? Well, I could meet a person that may have some knowledge that I can gain from. It's all about those experiences. And you mentioned something that was very interesting to me, because you said that when I went to the museums when I was young, I was kind of bored. It is because we don't have that understanding. And I was in the exact same situation. My dad was a historian, and because of that, he took us to literally every history museum known to man. And when we were there, when we were young, we just didn't understand it. But we were getting bombarded with all of this imagery, information, and all of that today has served me very well. So I'm glad that my dad took the time to take us to these places. So my parents, in the same respect, were very open-minded individuals, and I think it has helped me as an individual grow in many ways. When you were co-authoring the book, was there anything in particular that you felt you needed to focus on that could help students in any way, specifically creativity?
Yeah. For this edition, I was trying to help students to see the art around them, to see, and when I say art, I'm not just talking about framed paintings on canvas or sculpture, but I'm talking about sort of the visual world. Yeah, that it extends beyond painting and sculpture to include the graffiti on the trains that go by as you're waiting for the train crossing to raise, or it includes the photograph that's included on a magazine cover, or it includes the design that helps the brand sell it itself to you, that you're constantly surrounded by a visual culture that is giving you messages, is communicating with you, and shaping the way you think and what you do and what you buy. And so the goal with this new edition was to help students really see the impact of that, using examples that range from Confederate monuments and the sort of life and death struggles that were happening surrounding the Confederate monuments recently, or the photograph of the Vietnamese soldier who was executed. And that photograph in the 70s really helped to turn the tide of American sentiment toward American involvement in that war. And so for them to see that art is around them, it matters, it's affecting their lives, and to help them understand that they're using those skills, they're making the same artistic decisions multiple times a day. And, I'm going to pick on Instagram again, but every time you put that selfie up and you choose one filter versus another, or you make a meme and you pair image and text together to communicate just the right funny message that you want to communicate, you're making these artistic, creative decisions. And so that was really the goal with this edition and its revision, was to go to the student more. Sometimes textbooks especially can sit back and say, here's this body of information you need to know. And I wanted to get beyond that and say, you're living it already. You already live with art. And you, to be a good viewer of that, a knowledgeable one, a critical viewer of images is important just to be successful in society.
And I agree with that statement. And I think you hit it right on the nail right on the head, that it is important for us to have that ability in order for us to be somebody that can contribute to society. If we're able to understand it, if we're able to appreciate this thing called art, then we're able to contribute in many ways. And that's where I feel like there's a huge disconnect. I feel like there's a huge disconnect because we have, in essence, learned through many avenues that art is more of an elective than it is something that is, I guess, primordial to us. It's something that is embedded within our DNA and that we need on a day-to-day basis. And a great example that I give my students is literally the Paleolithic cave drawings. When we look at those, we have to kind of come up with an idea through educated individuals who study this, that they must have thought that this thing was important, or else they wouldn't have done it, right? You don't just randomly create drawings of horses and cows and creatures for no apparent reason whatsoever. And if individuals in the Paleolithic era had the wherewithal to understand that in some way it helped them, why do you feel there's such a disconnect today?
Yeah, no, it's a very good question. We've separated it off, and part of it is the lore of the artist and sort of the idea of the artist that emerged out of the 19th century and the 20th century with figures like Jackson Pollock, who sort of broodingly went off by himself and was the lone genius working outside of any context. And that separated art from life in a lot of ways, that art was beyond the cares of day-to-day life when it's totally enmeshed in it. And you can't get around art. It's all around you. And so it's not something that's done by folks off in a studio up in the forest or out by the beach that, not thinking about what's happening in the here and now.
Yeah, it can be as simple as you making something for breakfast in the morning and how you lay it out, the ingredients that you use. We very quickly in this show run out of time. So one of the questions that I want to ask you is, what are you working on right now?
Right now, my research area that I'm focusing on right now is Mexican 18th century prints. And so I'm working on a book chapter that is looking at the relationship between painters and printmakers in Mexico in the 18th century to show that the two groups were very close in their relationships, and we're working together as part of the same artistic community. And I'm gathering ideas for the next edition of Living with Art. And so I'm super excited because I'm going to Japan this summer for 3 weeks, and I'm traveling around, dragging my husband with me. And so he'll be the person running ahead in the museum and sitting on the bench. But to go see Japanese work, which I haven't had the chance to get to Japan before. So I'm super excited to go look at the work there.
And then you have also written other books and co-authored other books. What were those based on?
One book was a survey of Latin American colonial art, so 1521 to 1821, designed to support a class in colonial art history at the university level, because we just didn't have a text in English that would do that.
Okay.
And so it's been used by a lot of faculty around the country, which is exciting, because some have said, I wouldn't teach this if I didn't have this text to support.
Right.
So that made me feel really good. And another was a super deep dive about the founder of the first Royal Art Academy in the Americas, a guy named Jerónimo Antonio Gil, who came to Mexico in 1778 and opened the first academy in the Western Hemisphere. And so I looked at his life both in Spain and in Mexico.
So does that tell us that the artists that came over were well-trained artists at that point, or were there more like individuals that weren't that well-trained that were then in turn talking to individuals or teaching these individuals how to paint and draw?
I guess with colonial art, the answer is always D, all of the above. Some artists came over to the Americas who were highly trained. Others came and became trained here. There were, of course, indigenous artists who were already working here. Right. And so the situation in colonial Latin America is this wonderfully complex and interlayered topic to work with. So that's why I love this area.
So speaking about individuals coming from other places and teaching, one of the last questions that I always ask my guests is, what kind of advice can you give our viewing audience in reference to anything? I mean, it could be art-related, creativity-related, life-related. What can you tell them?
I guess I do a lot of advising for students, and so that's where my advice mind is. One is, pursue what speaks to you, what moves you, what you want to do, but have a plan. Follow your dream, but plan for it, but yet have some flexibility in that sometimes the plan changes. Marine biology went to art history, and pursue that. It's worth pursuing your dreams, but know, and this is sort of related to something I said earlier, you're going to fail occasionally.
Absolutely.
Pick yourself up, dust off, call your mom and cry, or whoever you cry to, and move forward, because it happens to everybody, and that resilience is one of the things we all need. So I think those would be my 2 pieces of advice.
And I think it's great advice, because same thing with me. I started off in architecture and ended up in art. So I did kind of go through all of that stumbling at some point, but ultimately I ended up in the field that I wanted to be in and loving what I do for a living. So I'm really excited to have you here talking to you, because it's important for us as viewers to get a better understanding of what this thing called art. And that's why I was so excited to have you on the show, because I get the opportunity to talk to somebody who has their hands in the mix and is constantly creating these books where we can learn from them, and specifically the art appreciation book, which is the Living with Art, which is so exciting for me to have gotten the opportunity to talk to you. So I wanted to thank you for taking the time out to be with us and give us some insight, a little bit about who you are and what you do. I hope you enjoyed yourself. I did. And thank you very much for inviting me. It's our pleasure. So I wanted to tell everybody, thank you very much for joining us. Again, my name is Miguel Valenzuela. And if you guys want to contact me, you guys can contact me at mvalen31@epcc.edu. And as always, we'll continue to bring you guys excellent guests. We'll see you guys next time. Thank you very much.